So welcome back. In the previous videos we were talking about some basic idea, and then we saw a couple of examples on your loan management system where our topic was like software analysis, and then we saw some examples of your data flow diagram. We looked into the constituents of it, we looked into level 0 of data flow diagram, and then we talked about level 1 of data flow diagram, that how it is decomposed and how it is derived from level 0. And afterwards we saw the process description, then we talked about your data flow description, we looked into your data store description, then we looked into several quality attributes or the quality guidelines of these data flow diagrams, where we said that okay, these things like incorrectness or inconsistencies should not be there. That means no proper direct interaction between your databases or between your two entities or entity and database. These things should not be there. And then we looked into the possibilities and the errors and the scope of improvements. And then we looked into your HIPPO diagram, which was your hierarchical input process output diagram, which was given by IBM in the year 1970. And in today's class we are going to talk about object oriented analysis and design. We'll talk about your use case activity diagram, and if time permits we'll also try to cover your state diagrams as well. So now to start with, what we have is your object oriented analysis. Some of you might have got some basic idea because you might have done some topics related to your object oriented analysis in your advanced programming course or object oriented design course, where you might have heard about class diagrams and other stuff. So what we do is that in this object oriented analysis, this is like a technical approach basically, where the purpose is to analyze and design the application, the system by applying your object oriented programming, right? As well as what we do is we go ahead with visual modeling as well. So object oriented analysis and design, that's why we call it as OONA, the object oriented analysis and design. So visually modeling throughout the software development process in order to guide the stakeholder and in order to look for the product quality as well, right? So what we have is we have your origin and concept or the principles or the techniques of object oriented analysis, and then we have your use case diagrams, use case analysis, you have use case activity diagrams and your state diagrams. Now to start with, the object oriented concepts mainly evolved during the late 80s and your early 90s, right? And by that time there were more than 100 software systems of more than 1 million lines of code, right? This is we are talking from the years 1980s to 90s, right? So a bit late. And the predominant software engineering analysis model was your DFDs, which we studied a few minutes back, which is your data flow diagrams, and your SSAD, structured system analysis and design. So DFDs use the concept of data flow through the software package and the principles of process decomposition and the data store decomposition in order to enhance the completeness, consistency and unambiguity of SRS. Whereas in the field of software engineering, the modularity is achieved through your programs or the subprograms or the functions, right? Your entire program is divided into several functions. Or you can call it as your modules like module 1, module 2 up to module n. And then local variables and parameter passing is done. The non-redundant relational data tables are used. Recall your classes from DBMS course where we went for database normalization. So overall this lead to a software package being made of loosely coupled and highly functional coherent software subprograms. Right, coupling and cohesion, I think I don't need to throw some light on this. So, but still there were some major concerns. For example, your data usage, that means your creation, modification and deletion was spread across many subprograms. And there were no concepts, principles or techniques to reason with your data independence, right? So this thing we are introducing now, data independence. Once again, you might have heard from your DBMS instructor about data independence. So basically your data independence is the ability to make changes to the data characteristics without having to make any changes to the programs that access the data. And this data independence is important because of the savings in time and the potential errors caused by reducing modifications to the data access software. Right, higher is the level of data independence, easier will be to access the data from the softwares. Now then we have like physical data independence, where what we do is that the internal level of the database is transformed, and then we play with your your conceptual level database and the internal level database. Recall that previous diagram of your data independence, where you used to have the database and then you had your, let me draw that diagram for you quickly so you'll get some idea and you'll be able to recall those things from your DBMS classes. So we had your database and then we had your physical schema, above which we had the conceptual schema, right? So and above which we had various views, v1, v2, v3 and so on and so forth. So we had various views, and we also had the concept of views, and we used to say that okay, this is your physical layer, this is your conceptual layer, and this is your external view, right? So further, the concepts, principles and techniques of object oriented approach had, like, your software automates the information processing. A wonderful abstraction in the field of information processing is your object, its own data, its responsibility to its user and its interaction with other objects. For example, I have like something called as loan, I have something called as book, I have something called as order, right? So all these things, what we'll have is we can have the object, its own data, its responsibility to the users and the interaction with other objects. So since we are talking about object oriented analysis, so definitely object will be our prime focus. So in object modeling, the static structure of the software system is modeled in terms of your objects only. So it identifies the objects and the classes into which the objects can be grouped and the relationship between the objects. Right, so I need to look for the relationships as well. It also identifies the main attributes and operations that characterize each class. So the process of object modeling can be visualized in like identify the object, identify the relationship, come up with the diagram, define the attributes, define the operations, and you are good for it. Now, so object-oriented approach to software engineering looks at all the models of software engineering and the phases of software engineering. So this is from the viewpoint of the information objects being taken through their own natural life cycles, right? So life cycle of the objects we are talking about, right? Life cycle of the objects we are talking about. So loan details being created, viewed, modified, deactivated, reactivated, monthly status being produced, closed, that means loan being closed, and so on and so forth. Similarly, for library management, let's say book details being created, right? So a typo error is there. Books being reserved, issued, returned, deleted, and so on and so forth. Right. So what we are talking about is the own natural life cycle. So we had three scientists, your Grady Booch and your James Rombaugh and your Ivar Jacobson. So James, you might have heard about your OAD, Object Oriented Analysis and Design, a phenomenal book given by, and it's also like similar, it's directly known by James Rombaugh. So these are known to have taken the object oriented technology to the best of your depth and breadth, independently with common concepts and principles, but with varied methodologies, notations, and techniques. So there was a public sentiment that they came together and unify the approach. So the Rational Software Company brought them together, which led to your unified approach and your unified modeling language, UML. So unified approach and UML adapted the Jacobson's use case approach and the use case analysis to your object oriented analysis. These two things to your object oriented analysis. So let's see what is there in this object oriented analysis. So let's take the same example of loan management. The previous one we were considering in our all previous discussions. So in that, what we see is that we can have an object which is of loan type, and the entity is the loan management staff and the loan management head is like creating a new loan type, modifying a new loan type, deactivating a new loan type. So from these two kinds of arrows, so this loan management staff activates it and your loan management head participates. So basically this is to give you a brief idea about your use case approach. So in your UML diagram, we have something called as your structural diagram and the behavioral diagram. Your structural diagrams are like your composite structure diagram, deployment diagram, your package diagram, your profile diagram, your class diagram, object diagram, your component diagram. Whereas in case of your behavioral diagram, we have like activity diagram, we have use case diagram, the one which we are covering, we have state machine diagram, we have interaction diagram where we have like sequence diagrams, communication diagrams, interaction overview diagram, timing diagram, and so on and so forth. Right, so these are like two major classifications. And now let's look into the properties of an object. Right, so since we are talking about object oriented analysis and its diagrams, so definitely it is going to be in and around the objects only. So let's see the properties of an object. So it has like business operations revolve around the objects. So all the business operations will revolve around the object only. And your objects have attributes. That means the data of their own. Your object have life of their own. That means are created, persisted, modified and deleted, and allow business operations being performed on them. Your objects are saved onto or retrieved from the permanent storage during the business operations. So that means my object will be saved and will be retrieved several times in a permanent storage during all these business operations. And a business operation can involve more than one distinct object now. It's like, it's not the only case that I'll only have a single object. I can have more than one object as well. And these objects generally interact, that means give and take information among themselves. That too during the business operations. That means my object is having a behavior. And that's why we said in our UML diagram also, we talk about behavioral diagram. So my object has a behavior. So from a given SRS, I can identify the objects, I can identify the attributes, and I can identify the attributes for each object. Then afterwards, my next step will be finding the use cases. So the business operations performed by users on each object will be identified. Afterwards, categorize the users, and then finally elaborate the use case. That means unravel the scenarios of each use case. So the things will be much more clearer with the help of an example which I am going to take in the next few slides. But before that, let's talk about some of the important questions in my object-oriented approach. Now the point is how to identify objects in the business operation. So there are important guidelines, but no scientific technique to identify an object in a business operation. So basically your noun phrases in the SRS that describes information being created, persisted, modified, viewed, presented or reported or deleted and have a life of its own. For example, I can have a loan, I can have a book, I can have a PNR, I can have a flight number, I can have a customer and whatnot. Your roll number or registration number, that can be considered as an object as well. So some of the non-objects can be your login, date of journey, ticket amount, right? Because ticket amount is like, it can be common for several people. Date of journey can be common for several people, and on the same date I can have multiple journeys as well. So these things are like non-objects. I cannot consider these. These are something which are not unique. My book number will be unique, PNR will be unique, roll number will be unique, registration number will be unique, right? Customer ID will be unique. And these things can be considered as the objects. Then the next question is, how to identify the actions performed on an object and the actors who perform those actions. Means I am trying to identify the actions performed on the object and who all will be the participants or the actors who will be performing those actions. So there are important guidelines once again, but no scientific technique. So the verb phrases in an SRS that describes an operation performed on the objects. So all the verb phrases in an SRS to be considered. For example, your loan application is created by Citizen. And your loan application is validated by loan management staff. And your loan application is approved or rejected by your loan management head. So by this time you might have got an idea that what we have as an object. Right, what we have as an object. Now let's talk about this actions further. So some categories of the users trigger an action on an object, whereas others participate in the operations being performed on an object. So one is like triggering, another one is participating. Right, in this one someone was activating, someone was participating in this diagram. Once again we will take this diagram formally in the next few slides. So one is triggering, another one is participating. For example, the citizens create a loan application object through a triggering action. Your loan management staff participates and validates the loan application object. So I was the one who initiated this, the loan application, and the staff is initially participating. Then loan management staff triggers the modification part to a loan type object, and the loan management head participates and approves or rejects the modification. So this time in the second phase someone else triggered this thing, which is the modification to a loan type object, and this time my loan management head was participating in this task. So it's like switching between the people. So let's once again see the same example of your loan management. Now considering the SRS of the loan management, our discussion started with loan management, right? In this I have the object of loan type. So this loan management staff activates or the triggers create a loan type, loan management head is participating. Modify a loan type, loan management head is participating. Or deactivating, right? So once again he is participating, he or she is participating. Triggering was done here. Triggering was once again done here. Now, next will be, I'll be elaborating it. So, identify objects, their attributes, and operations to be performed on the objects by different actors. Right. Then, elaborate each business operation to be performed on each object as an ordered sequence of unit level activities. So your use case activity diagrams describe the minutest level or the unit level activities to be performed on an object, and in its response the behavior towards the actions as a part of the business operation on that object. So this is nothing but the entire business operation taking place. Right, this is nothing but the entire business operation which is taking place. Now next is your role of use case activity diagrams. So all possible responses of an object to a triggering action are modeled as the acyclic graph. Your use case activity diagrams are helpful when the situation is complicated within multiple or the alternate possibilities of response from the object. Right, in this case it becomes very handy to use case activity diagram. So now from this let's elaborate the use case activity diagram. Elaborate the use cases as your use case activity diagram. So what we have is create loan application, validate loan application. In this case either I'll reject and it would be a failure and a closure, or else I'll approve and I'll take the next step, or else I'll suspend and I'll recheck. Once again I'm reaching to the failure, and from here I can move to this part as well. That means after suspension I got some inputs, so once again I can approve it. So what I have done is here I have done the elaboration part. That means there are possibilities that from here also I can approve it or I can close it. So on one side I can move to this side and this angle where I'll go ahead with approving the loan application, or else I'll close it. Now further what we are going to do is we are going to elaborate the use case as your use case activity diagram. So what we have done is I have started access the ABC Bank's loan management software. This loan management software displays the home page. From this, citizen selects either sign in, so I have a condition here, or log in. If suppose I have an account already with this particular bank, then I can simply log in, or else I need to sign in. So So once I have validated the details, once again I am entering into a condition, all fields are valid. If no, my loan management software is going to display an error, and once again the citizen needs to enter the details. From this login details displayed, I'll go to citizen enters login detail. Once again, I'm going ahead with user ID and password matching. If it is correct, then login completed successfully, or else once again the citizen needs to enter. Now this A1 is given because see, there will be a start symbol, there will be a stop symbol, right? Start and then stop. But since now my page is complete, so and I need to take this diagram to the next page, so I need to have a connector. So what I've done is I've added this connector A1. So I've reached here. So my loan management software displays the loan home page. So citizen chooses apply for a loan, and my loan management software displays loan application form this time. Citizen fills the loan application form. Once again I need to check if the fields are valid, then loan management software acknowledges by giving loan application ID. Right, just like your customer ID is given or complaint ID is given, so loan application ID is given, or else this loan management software displays error and once again goes to this where citizen has to fill the loan application form. This thing continues and we reach to this particular stop condition. Right, it can continue further based on the entire business transaction. Right, I'm not talking about software transaction, I am talking about business transaction. Your business transaction will have a series of user input, system processing and your system output. Now let's say these are some improvements to the use case activity diagram, where what we are trying to do is we have given user input, system output, user input, then condition, right, some amount of system processing and so on and so forth. So what we have done is we have user input, system processing, system output and some check conditions as well, and that can be added to everything. Now in this object oriented approach, what we are trying to do is we are identifying the objects, their attributes and operations to be performed on the object by different actors, elaborate each business operations to be performed on the object as an ordered sequence of unit level activities using your use case activity diagrams. Then the refinement of the use case using the concept of extensions and inclusions. Now let's see the concept of extensions and inclusions. So what we have is same one triggers, creates a loan type, creates a new loan type for NRIs, approve a loan type, right, and participation is going on. What I have done is I went for an extension and this asterisk is like includes approve loan type. Now extensions are specializations of the base of use case, and your inclusions are proper subset of the base use case. Now so here what we do is we have discussed all these points, and one thing we need to take care of is we need to avoid the paralysis of analysis. Right, my analysis gets paralyzed. I don't have to get into that trouble. Go ahead with state diagrams. So your state diagrams are typically used to analyze the embedded software programs. So your state diagrams are the part of your UML diagrams, right? And UML state diagram concepts and notations are used. Here we have the heuristics for making good state diagrams. So a state diagram is used to represent the condition of the system or part of the system at a finite instance of time. So once again, it's a behavioral diagram. Right, it's a behavioral diagram which represents the behavior using your finite state transitions. So state diagrams are also referred to as your state machines or state chart diagrams. That means you can also call it as state machines or state chart diagrams. So these terms are often used interchangeably. So a state diagram is used to model the dynamic behavior of a class in response to time and the changing external stimuli. So we can say that each and every class has a state, but we don't model every class using state diagrams. So a state is a mode or condition of being, and an event is a noteworthy occurrence of stimuli or input at a particular time, and a transition is a change from one state to other. So using these three things, we are going to go ahead with state diagram. So what we can have is, let's say I am a customer and I'm going to start. Then let's say I went for swiping a card. Then I am waiting for a pin. Right. So pin verification may take place. And then it may continue. Let's take some example of it so the things will be clear. Right. So we went for on. So it is stopped. I can go ahead with record. So recording starts. Once again I can stop it. Right. I can go ahead with playing. There also I can play and stop. I can go ahead with rewind. There also I can rewind or I can stop. And all these things takes to the final off. Right. So just a state transition diagram. State transition diagram. So this state transition diagram or the state diagrams are using the concept of finite automaton, right? You might have studied in your automata course. So in this thing, what we do is that this solid one is nothing but the initial or final state, and the arrows, the solid arrows, are the transition. So the solid arrows are used to represent the transition or the change of control from one state to another. The arrow is labeled with the event which causes the state change, right? So the arrow is labeled with an event, and your rectangular boxes with a circular end are the state. Right, this is the state. And then if suppose I see any state with this self arrow, this is called as your self transition. This is called as your self transition. So a formal model that abstracts the states and the state transition is your state diagrams. A finite state machine or finite automaton specification must describe all states unambiguously and all transitions by stating the source and destination states and the triggering events. That's what we are doing in this particular case. Everything is well added. Designate an initial state and optionally one or the more halt state as well. Right, so I have this initial state, I have this final state. In between I can have some halt states as well. Right, so these are your halting states. So represent states by rounded rectangles containing the state name. Represent the transitions by solid arrows labeled with the transition string. So transition string is nothing but it describes the triggering circumstance, right? It is like triggering event. And actions that results. So initial state designates the initial state, optional or final state represents the halting state. So let's talk about the consistency check in your state diagrams. Make one initial state in every state diagram including the nested state diagrams. Check that no event labels two or more transitions from a state. Check that no arrow leaves a final state. Check for the black holes or the dead states and white holes which are the unreachable states. So this was all about your UML state diagrams. So in this, by this time we have talked about data flow diagrams, we have talked about object oriented diagrams, we have talked about use case activity diagram, and we have talked about your state diagrams. So now let's summarize everything which we have studied. So the data flow diagrams enables the software engineering professional to analyze the flow of data in the to be developed software in a top-down way. It identifies the input and output data elements, the data stores, and the unit level processes that transform input data into the output. Your object-oriented analysis enables the software engineering professionals to view the to be developed software package as performing relevant business operations on the business objects. Now, this is something which is very important. Your UML use case approach is a way to divide a complex set of business operations into distinct operations by different categories of users on various business objects. And lastly, the object-oriented analysis enables the software engineering professionals to, while UML use case activity diagrams are typically quite useful to analyze the management information processing scenarios,